And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
25. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon. You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where SpaceX is set to launch more Starlink V2 mini satellites on the 12-7 mission. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for today's launch stream. I see all of the 5x5s in chat, meaning that you can hear me, and I'm glad you can. But don't worry, as always, it's not just me that you're going to be stuck hearing during today's launch. We have an amazing array of people in the field today. Let's start off with Max Evans. Max, how's it going?
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, it's a nice change of pace. We actually have some daylight here out at the Kennedy Space Center in for a Starlink mission. Hooray! But yes, it is a beautiful day, and we are looking forward to hopefully seeing Falcon 9 get off the ground.
That's all what we're hoping for. We are also happy to have DUIs with us. D, how's it going?
It is a great day out here. You know, gorgeous sunlight. It somewhat setting sun already at this point. It's a wonderful, wonderful evening to watch some satellites go to space.
Exactly. We should have some awesome lighting from the looks of it here. And we'll talk about the weather and all that as we continue on in the broadcast. And of course, we have Jay Keegan, who is pushing the buttons, pulling the levers behind the scenes, and bringing all the views to you. Now, there is a chance we might see some views from someone else who happens to be down at the Cape, whose name happens to rhyme with Moss. So keep an eye out for that. We shall see. There's the spoiler, by the way. It is DOS. If you have any questions, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can throughout the course of today's launch stream. But Max, do you mind kicking things off here and giving us a rundown of our mission and our booster here?
So I can at least talk about the booster for you. So for the Starlink Group 12-7 mission today, over on the docket at Slick 40 is booster B1076, hopefully about to embark on its 20th flight in just under 1 hour's time. As with this hopefully being its 20th flight, it has flown previously 19 times with missions including the likes of CRS-26, SXM-9, OneWeb Launch 16, Intelsat IS-40E, O3B mPOWER, Avzon 3, Eutelsat 36D, Türksat 6A, Maxar 2, and 10 previous Starlink missions. Hopefully around 8 minutes into flight, the first stage booster will be meeting the recovery drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas of around 600 kilometers downrange, and just a bit farther downrange than that is the fairing recovery ship Doug. So business as usual today for SpaceX.
We say business as usual as we have a booster getting ready to fly for the 20th time. Like it's not a big deal, right?
Yeah, this is the 9th booster to fly hopefully 20 times, so which is pretty remarkable considering the 20 flight number was, I guess, borderline fantasy even up to about 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, there was always the questions of will it, won't it, and yet, yeah, we are close to double-digit boosters flying 20 times. It still boggles my mind. Now, as for the weather, I mean, it seems absolutely beautiful out there. D, can you kind of give us a weather update? And also, Apocalypse Cow wants to know, is there a jellyfish opportunity today?
You know, the weather is absolutely gorgeous. As you can see, it's a great clear day out here. So There really aren't too many concerns. They've got a 5% probability of violation, according to the 45th Weather Squadron forecast, and that's for the cumulus cloud rule. But that is basically as good as it gets. They do have a low to moderate additional risk criteria for upper level wind shear. We are seeing a little bit of a breeze here, but nothing too crazy. As far as a jellyfish opportunity, it might be a little bit too early for that, unfortunately. However, it's going to be a gorgeous launch today, nonetheless.
It absolutely is. I mean, it looks gorgeous just from the camera views there. It's, as you saw, not super hot, not super cold as it has been, so kind of in that Goldilocks zone. And I
Yeah, it certainly is. We are not bundled up for this launch, and being in the afternoon, evening time, we've got some nice sunlight. So it is just a wonderful temperature out here today.
wait, Max, you're not bundled up for this?
I actually am wearing a bit of a sweatshirt today because it did start out pretty chilly this morning. But honestly, this warmth that we are feeling today is a very pleasant change of pace considering what we've had for the past few weeks with lows in the mid to low 40s and highs only in the 50s, which might not be that cold for some people, but for us here in Florida, it is very chilly. So today's weather, it feels like an absolute blessing. It is wonderful.
That is nice. And by the way, I should point out, we did have someone ask, what do we mean by jellyfish opportunity? So essentially, as Falcon 9 climbs higher up, as it reaches near a point where the sun is either rising or setting, the light will hit just right on the exhaust plume that it expands outward and looks like the top of a jellyfish. So that is why we call it the jellyfish effect, because the way the sunlight hits it, it does look like a jellyfish top, so to speak. So that, as mentioned, typically happens about an hour before sunset to an hour before sunrise. Those are the rough times. And sometimes the moon can cause what we call a moon jelly. So it's a very narrow window to be able to get that. But when you do, it is a spectacular view.
For clarification there, sorry, I think you meant not 1 hour after sunset, not
Hours,
before.
yes. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I meant. Hour after sunset, an hour before sunrise. I think I got them backwards.
There you go.
One thing that is not backwards is what we have on board. This one is another 21 Starlink V2 mini satellites, of which we know 8 of them are the normal ones and 13 are the direct to cell, which, for those who don't know, what is the difference between a normal and a direct to cell one, Max? Max can just ignore me.
So I'll hop in here
Go
real
for
quick.
it, D.
So the direct to cell satellites are really honestly impressive bit of technology working with T-Mobile here in the US that is able to communicate directly from those satellites on orbit to any normal cell phone with normal antennas. So whereas the usual Starlink V2 Mini we're used to can only communicate with the big Starlink dishes or the Starlink minis on the ground, those direct to cell have the capability to connect to your cell phone. So, depending on where in the world you are and what carrier you have, you're able to use those frequencies to get things like texting and eventually, hopefully, calling and data over these satellites. So, even if you're a long distance from a typical cell tower, you can have that level of emergency communication, which it's really cool to see.
Exactly. And yeah, as Alex was kind of pointing out, and I'm sure we'll hear from Alex coming up in just a little bit, giving giving him a break between the chopstick lift stream and this. Some of them are a little bit heavier there, so that's kind of why it's a mix and why we only see 21 satellites versus the more that we are used to seeing. And as we continue to take a look here, coming up on about 49 minutes to go until today's launch of those Starlink V2 mini satellites. I also want to thank some people here who have been already coming in generously with the support. Apocalypse Cow also gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you very much for that. Dan, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. And Lords of Random, thank you for the $2 super chat as well. Much appreciated. Now, in terms of, we've talked about the launch. What we haven't really talked about is the landing. D, what are we looking at trajectory-wise for people that want to see it, and where is it going to be landing?
Yeah, so this launch is going to go on a southeast trajectory that we're pretty used to out here, and it will be landing on a shortfall of gravitas northeast of the Bahamas. Uh, in order to recover the fairings, SpaceX has dug out there to fish out those, as they were once described, pile of cash floating down from the sky out of the water.
I mean, it is a perfect description because when you're talking about parts of a rocket, obviously, fuel, it seems like would be a huge cost. In comparison to the vehicle, it's not that much, but those fairings, they're what, a couple $1 million each half, approximately?
Yes. So the fairings are obviously divided into obviously two. One of which being the active fairing and one being the passive. The active fairing is what does the pushing for fairing separation a few minutes after liftoff and just after staging. I don't have the exact figures on how much they cost, but it's in the neighborhood of I think $2 to $3 million a piece. Although I think there is a significant price decrease for the passive fairing half. So while there is, even with that discount, the fairings still are pretty expensive for what they are.
Oh, absolutely. And when we talk about the active and passive halves, there is one side that has a pusher mechanism in it. So that is what physically pushes the two halves away from each other. The other half just kind of receives the push. So that's what we mean by there is an active side and a passive side. And also, I guess we talk about fairings and all of that a lot, but we don't necessarily talk about why they're there. D, why do we even have the fairings?
Yeah, so the fairings are an important part of protecting the satellites as they work their way through the atmosphere. We see those fairings separate shortly after stage 1 and 2 separate. That's when the atmosphere is really thinned out, so the satellites aren't being impacted by basically the air molecules as the rocket is flying on its way to space.
Yeah, those fairings are super important. It helps with the aerodynamics. If anyone has played Kerbal, yeah, they're a little more useful in real life, and definitely don't separate into 60,000 pieces. This one is just 2 pieces, thankfully. And
Hopefully.
well, yes, that is true. That is what we hope for. And I think the coolest part also with these is how they're recovered. I mean, these actually are able to control themselves on the way down, Max, right?
Indeed. So each fairing half has their own set of guidance, of GNC guidance and control, and also RCS thrusters to orient themselves for atmospheric reentry. Because of the speeds that they are coming, they do not need any sort of, I guess, thermal protection system like that we see on Starship, because these speeds are relatively low, and also given the very blunt shape that the fairing halves have. That actually makes it ideal for any reentry into the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, because you want a more blunt surface rather than a pointy surface, as some people might think. And once they reach a certain speed into the atmosphere and they are going slow enough, each fairing half has a parachute to deploy and slow itself down even more for a controlled splashdown in the Atlantic or the Pacific Oceans for recovery aboard Bob or Doug or a vessel out in the Pacific. So the fairing halves seem, I guess, passive on first glance, but because SpaceX wants to reuse them, they each, in essence, are their own craft.
So this is what it looks like, by the way, for inside. There is the fairing halves pushing away each other from a Starlink launch. I just love the onboard views of this.
There's also a great video from the Viasat 3 America's Falcon Heavy mission way back in May, or I think it was either April or May of 2023. That was a fully expendable Falcon Heavy, and SpaceX posted a video taken from inside of one of the fairing halves as the fairing was re-entering into the atmosphere, because to that point, I think that was the fastest any fairing halves had ever re-entered the atmosphere, because of course the Falcon Heavy center core was being expended and thus traveling a lot faster than Falcon 9 ever does with those fairing halves. So I don't know if we can pull it up while we're talking about it, but I would highly encourage anyone to check it out. It is astounding.
Yeah, that was a really cool view. You see how hot they get, and the fact that they're able to then scoop them out of the water, load them onto a ship, bring them to Port Canaveral, and offload them is really cool. And you could also tell if they recovered all of them and the condition of all of them by watching Space Coast Live, our 24/7 live feeds, because we do have cameras there as the fairings come in, and you get to see them offloaded and then continuing onward. So it's really, really cool. And that reminds me, one of our awesome people that works on our Space Coast Live cameras, Gage, is actually out in the field for today's launch as well. So a shout out to Gage, and fingers crossed that they actually get to see the launch this time, considering their track record is not the best, shall we say, in being able to actually see these.
Oh no.
I won't say any specific words, but yeah, there hasn't been a lot of launches while they've been at the Cape. And that is the view, by the way, that we were talking about, that re-entry heating for the Viasat 3 mission. That is
all of that plasma just coming off the fairing half, and the camera right inside the fairing half here is shielded and has a great view looking backwards. That is remarkable. It's incredibly vivid and just, I guess, vibrant here too.
Yeah, that is traveling 15 times the speed of sound for reference.
Remarkable.
That is, yeah, as Chris Bergen would like to say, bonkies. Amazing, the records that they're setting. Let's see here again. If you have questions, tag us at NASA Spaceflight as we come up on the 41-minute mark, and we should hopefully start getting into the nitty-gritty of the countdown in just a little bit. The next major milestone being, hopefully, the go for propellant load being given at T-minus 38 minutes. At T-minus 35, that is when fueling begins on stage 1 of both the RP-1, the rocket propellant 1, the refined form of kerosene, as well as LOX, the liquid oxygen, going into stage 1. Meanwhile, stage 2 will just begin with the RP-1 load. That will continue till about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds when we get not only a vent, but the best vent with the LOX chill down. And then the stage 2 LOX load will begin about 4 minutes after that. If only there was someone here that had an even better knowledge of Falcon 9 than myself to help with commentary here. If only we had maybe Alex with us?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that's a vent, but it's also an event on the timeline.
Hey! Alex coming in with the pun. I love it. Well, while we have you here, here's a question from John, who's wondering how much refurbishment is required for these boosters between flights. Do we actually know?
Well, unfortunately, we don't know the details, right? But you can think about the usual things like inspections. You obviously want to make sure that after the booster lands, it is still good to go, right? So you look at things like the fuel pumps on the engines. You look at the valves. You make sure that everything is in good condition. Normally, if I were to guess, those things could take just a few days, right? And we've seen boosters, like the fastest turnaround of a booster so far being until now, until the current record is just 13 days. So 13 days, and it was a booster that landed on a drone ship. So if you think about it, it had to have a few days of integration, right, with the rocket and everything, and after landing. So on one end of the process, it had those few days of integration with the second stage, the payload and whatnot. And on the other end, it also had to be processed. The drone ship had to come back to port, get off the drone ship, put it horizontally, right? Like there's a few days on each side of that process, of that turnaround time. So it's very likely that the whole inspections and refurbishment time was maybe like a week, right? Like 7 days or something like that, and then 3 days each end of the process, and you get post landing stuff and pre-launch stuff. So 7 days is at least more or less what you could guess for what it takes for the refurbishment and inspection process. But that's the little details, unfortunately, we don't know. But again, if you think about things that may wear off and you might need to inspect, for example, the structure, you don't need to test the structure every single time or do like inspections on the welds and things like that every single time that you fly, especially now that they have several boosters. This booster, if it flies successfully, then it'll be the 9th time a booster has been reused for a 20 flight. So that's a lot of flights that they already have and they already know. So it's sort of like an aircraft, right? Where you have inspections between flights and maybe some maintenance, but deep maintenance, like looking at the structure and everything, or the engines and things like that. You have it, less often, 100 flights or something like that. I don't really know too much about planes in that particular sense. Probably should have asked Ryan Weber before that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there are parts of your rocket that you don't really need to go through with a tooth comb, essentially, right? And so you just inspect it, make sure that it works, and go on with the next flight. And those things can be, again, turbo pumps, valves, making sure that all of the pipes and everything are cleaned and all that, and good to go for another launch. That's something that I can easily imagine might be part of the process. Of course, it's probably not the entire thing.
That's a pretty good idea, I think, from that answer. And we are now under 37 minutes to go, which is a perfect transition to a question I have from Chill Godzilla Fan. I'm going to throw this one over to you, D. They're wondering, have we heard anything about the plans for potential Starship operations at Slick 37? That's why I picked that one now at 37 minutes. But D, any word on that?
I have not heard anything in particular, but I have not been super up to date with all the going-ons of New Glenn and such recently, so I'm not sure if Alex has perhaps heard anything that I may have missed.
Not really. The last thing, it was that environmental impact statement process, and they did their comment period and everything. We're waiting on the draft of that EIS, of that environmental impact statement. Maybe coming up in springtime. I'm not sure if they're going to be sticking to that, though. Sometimes things delay a little bit.
Things delay a little bit in spaceflight. No, I had no idea.
Hopefully not this launch, though.
High gauge, that's all I'll say.
Oh, dear.
No, it has begun.
Well, what hopefully will begin momentarily now is prop load as we hit the T-minus 35-minute mark. So keep an eye on your screen for the potential frost. If we see that, then we will have good indication that prop load is underway, and they are indeed targeting today's launch at around 5:05 p.m., so 35 minutes and 8 seconds from now. Angry American with the support saying, don't forget to smash the like to smack the algorithm monster. That's the caps, so I emphasize those. Thank you. And Taserface saying, oh boy, the punishing puns are here too. Yes, they are. Ha 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 ha. Here's a question for you, Alex. Jared wants to know, like B-1086, can a Falcon 9 booster be turned into a Falcon Heavy booster? Because we've seen it go the other way.
Yeah, it can be turned into a side booster, though, not a Falcon Heavy center core, though. So we've seen this, for example, with B-1023 and B-1025. Both flew their first missions as Falcon 9 boosters. One of them flew on the CRS-9 mission, and the other flew on the Tycom 8 mission. And the Falcon Heavy that they flew on was the Falcon Heavy demo mission. So those two side boosters that you see, on that flight when they launched the Roadster and everything, those two side boosters had already flown before on Falcon 9 missions. And of course, we've seen that as well with B-1052, where it launched a, say, Falcon Heavyside booster twice, actually, and then it was turned into a Falcon 9 booster, and then it was turned back again into a Falcon Heavyside booster for the Viasat 3 mission, which is in fact the mission that we showed that re-entry of the fairing from. Well, that re-entry was so hot because the Falcon Heavy boosters, the sides and the center core, were all three boosters expended, and so they pushed the limits. They pushed that speed, and so when the fairings deployed, they deployed at a very high speed, and so they also re-enter at a very high speed, and so that's why they made notes of that, and that's why they had that fancy video. So more of it, SpaceX.
Yeah, and I believe that Sidecore, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the ones at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex that's on display at Gateway.
Yeah, the 23, the one from Tycho made.
There it is, yeah. So you can see one for yourself. Here's one from KJC, and it's a two-parter. Max, I think you got these. First one, do you think there will be a Starship Heavy? But most importantly here also, why has SpaceX not caught a Falcon 9?
Well, I think to answer the first question, it's for one, it's already called Starship Super Heavy. So I think if you're implying putting on or strapping on two super heavy boosters to the side of a Starship super heavy stack, I guess that would be a super duper heavy launch vehicle. But I don't. Oh God, if there was ever a need for that vehicle for any sort of payload mass, with at least 99 Raptor engines, at that point that wouldn't be a rocket. That would be just straight up a force of nature. So I don't think there are any plans for that currently. But we will for sure keep our eyes open. But the reason why they have not caught Falcon 9 in the same way they do Starship is because Falcon 9 does what they call a propulsive landing, meaning it uses its own engines to land itself. So upon entry burn, it ignites 3 of its Merlin 1D engines, first starting out with 1 and then going out to 3, and then back out to 1, and then obviously shutting off the center engine. The reason they do that is to decrease the velocity of the booster before it re-enters the thickest part of the atmosphere, so the loads on the booster are decreased, and the chances of it crumpling or breaking up are, I guess, the odds of that happening are next to zero. So, and then for a landing, more often than not, they perform a single engine landing. So for drone ship landings, they stick with a single engine landing. But it's quite tricky though, because they have to light that Merlin 1D at a very specific time and distance away from the drone ship, because the Merlin 1D, even one Merlin 1D by itself, throttled all the way down, still has too much thrust for a Falcon 9 booster to hover. So if they ignite it too early, the booster will not land. It will begin to ascend again. If they light it too late, the booster crashes either into the ocean or into the drone ship, and that's why it has, I guess, unlovingly been called a suicide burn at times. Whereas obviously the super heavy booster using 3 of its 33 Raptor engines does have the ability to, I guess, hover and walk itself into where the chopsticks are. But SpaceX had the idea of propulsively landing a booster many, many years ago, and the idea of catching the Starship Super Heavy booster was just a different philosophy for a different vehicle. Falcon 9 was optimized for commercial use and for driving the cost of spaceflight down as a whole, and propulsive landing was just the obvious choice at that point for no additional programming or infrastructure anywhere else other than a drone ship and maybe some landing legs and grid fins, as we see on the Falcon 9 first stage boosters. But just two different philosophies, basically.
Exactly, and it's one of those things where at this point, Falcon 9 has flown so many times and has become so reliable. It has the human rating, all of that it doesn't make sense to redesign the vehicle to modify it to be caught.
Indeed, and that is also why it is not as easy as some may think to just swap over a Raptor engine onto Falcon 9. Of course, the obvious differences being the engine sizes, and also the engines run on different propellants, which have different densities, which means the tank sizes, excuse me, would have to be different. And also, hot staging is not a thing on Falcon 9, obviously, with the pusher system pushing up on the Merlin 1D vacuum optimized engine and igniting well after stage separation. The day of Falcon 9 hot stages is going to be a very bad day for a lot of people.
I mean, I guess kind of like inflate abort, although that's a little different.
That was Dragon, yeah. So I guess technically a hot stage, but it wasn't stage 2. It was Dragon.
Yeah, it was the Super Dracos, but still, I mean, it's close enough. But yeah, so that is why we see the landing, and one thing that we are also starting to see on the vehicle here, it looks like we are having frost formation, which is a good thing. That means that they are on track into propellant load. So we will keep an eye on those levels as they rise up. I have to say, it's a lot easier to see where they are with propellant load on a booster that is about to fly for the 20th time, when you see all of the soot and everything on it, how dark it is, and you get the ice, the frost outside. It's a lot easier. While we're talking about the comparisons here, Alex, Barry wanted to know, given that Falcon 9 has to do an entry burn to keep from getting too hot in the engine bay, and what we saw with Super Heavy getting glowing red during re-entry, why doesn't Super Heavy just do the same thing that Falcon 9 does?
Well, the whole reason is just down to the reentry, the reentry speed. So whenever this launches, because it should be in 27 minutes, right? But knock on wood, gauge is there, so you never know. Once this launches, right, and so you're gonna be able to see on the telemetry that MECO happens roughly 8,000 kilometers per hour. It's not exactly. Some Starlink missions is like 7,900, and others is like 8,100. But normally it's like around 8,000 kilometers per hour. When you look at the Super Heavy, when it shuts down its engines and that's the hot staging, the velocity, if I'm not mistaken, is closer to like 5,000 or even less than that kilometers per hour. And then it does a boost back burn, and during the re-entry, it's like maybe 3,000, 4,000 kilometers per hour. That's the speed of the Falcon 9 booster after the entry burn. When the Falcon 9 booster comes through the atmosphere and does that entry burn, before the entry burn, it's somewhere around 7,500 kilometers per hour. But then it does the re-entry burn, it slows down, and then it's about 5,000 kilometers per hour, which is about the same speed as the Super Heavy booster. So that's why it doesn't need the entry burn, because the conditions for that Super Heavy are very similar to the same conditions that the Falcon 9 already sees after it has already completed its entry burn. And so if you think about it, well, if it's what happens to the Falcon 9 after the entry burn? Doesn't do any other burns, right? It just steers itself to the landing site, and then it does the landing burn once it's close, and it lands on the drone ship or lands on the landing zone, whether it's on land or on a drone ship. And so that's basically the whole reason why. Now there's a caveat here, which is Super Heavy is a lot heavier, and this is not a pun. It's actually the whole deal. Like, it's called Super Heavy for a reason, right? And what happens is that it is quite heavier compared to its area that's presented to the air, which means the drag ratio to its mass, it's going to be lower. So it's going to accelerate more through the atmosphere when it comes through the thickest parts of the atmosphere. So one thing that you will see if you compare that to the Falcon 9 is that while the entry velocity is the same, as it comes through the thickest parts of the atmosphere, Falcon 9 slows down further than what the Super Heavy booster does. Super Heavy booster, its landing burn is nearly at Mach 1. It's a bit under supersonic speeds, essentially. Whereas the Falcon 9 goes transonic, and subsonic, and then I think it is like 900 kilometers per hour or so, which is a bit like on the higher end of an airliner speeds, essentially. And so that's the key point as well, why you see that glowing, because it's also the fact that while the initial conditions are very similar between the Falcon 9 booster and the Super Heavy also comes in a lot faster towards the end and very close to that landing burn, which, by the way, makes it a lot more exciting. I like Falcon 9. I'm a Falcon 9 lover, but the fact that the super heavy booster, it just goes down and it comes back a lot faster. Yeah, that's quite an effect, I guess.
By the way, the back channel pointing out that Gage isn't the only bad luck charm with Florida launches. Alex.
Yeah, but I'm not there.
True,
So-
but want to talk of last time you were there, there was a mishap investigation basically around each one. So just say,
Ouch.
love you. Anyway, well, I sorry making fun of the Spaniard here. Don't worry, we can redeem Spain here. If we take a look just one pad over at Launch Complex 39A, they just had the transporter erector raised and then lowered again. You can see it kind of there on the bottom right, that white structure. There is the strongback, the TE, that was just lowered down. That is set to roll back, and there is a launch there Wednesday, and that is a SpainSat. Max, you saw the booster rolling by earlier, right?
I was actually not at the press site to watch it drive by, unfortunately. I was
But
still at
we
home.
saw it.
But we did see it. We saw it on Space Coast Live, and there it is rolling past the VAB. And I think for the more keen-eyed viewers, you will notice that this booster is, unfortunately, I have to say, missing a set of landing legs and grid fins. So, unfortunately, given the demands for where the customer wants this payload to go, it looks like because of the performance needed from Falcon 9, they're going to have to send it into the drink, the Atlantic Ocean. So it's not often anymore that we see a fully dispensed of Falcon 9, but this is one of those rare cases, and of course it is a heavily used booster as well. I believe this will be its 21st and final flight.
Yeah,
that is actually.
No,
Oh.
go ahead. I was just going to ask you about the details for it. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because this is like a sister booster or a brother booster, I guess, of the one that we're seeing right here at 40. Because 73, this is the one that just rolled without the legs, right? And then we have here on the pad 76. They were both built originally with the thought of those two being Falcon Heavy side boosters. And in fact, I don't know if we want to roll back again that clip, but you can see that it is missing the Falcon 9 logo and the US flag on that booster that rolled by. That is because Falcon Heavy side boosters don't have those features. So it has the SpaceX logo, but it doesn't have the Falcon 9 logo and the US flag. The booster on the pad at pad 40 that is being fueled right now also lacks the Falcon 9 logo and the US flag. Both were built sort of, with a thought initially that they were going to be Falcon Heavy side boosters. Unfortunately, they never flew as Falcon Heavy side boosters, so their entire careers have been as Falcon 9 boosters. But, they were originally built with that intention, and we know that because of the logos of how they are, because it's the same layout as a Falcon Heavy side booster.
We know it's because the way they are. But yeah, you got two side boosters, both flying side by side here as Falcon 9s. The one on the left, of course, scheduled to launch Wednesday from 39A. That one will be expended, but scheduled to launch in about T-minus 20 minutes and 25 seconds is the one on the right, which means we're also scheduled for not just any vent, but the best vent, the T-minus 20 minute, 20 second vent as we get that much closer to launch. Beautiful! And D, what is happening with this vent?
So this vent is the preparation for liquid oxygen loading of stage 2. So liquid oxygen, of course, is very cold, so they can't just start flowing that through all the pipes. That causes a lot of thermal contraction and thermal shock. So this vent is in order to cool down all of that infrastructure that will load stage 2, and when it ends in a few minutes from now, that is when liquid oxygen loading on the second stage will begin.
There we go. You can see there in the timeline, that is the LOX chill down. Fuel loading continues into the first stage, and then once that stops, we will get to the LOX load, and that will continue all the way down till about 120 seconds, 2-ish minutes before launch. speaking of the launch, this is Falcon 9, for those just joining, on the Starlink 12-7 mission. On board, we have Starlink V2 mini satellites, including 8 of the quote-unquote normal ones, and 13 equipped with the special direct-to-cell feature that will be able to utilize internet from space onto your cell phone at some point. As for the booster for this mission, Alex, this one's flown quite a few times. We were talking about the one that will be expended next time, but this one about to hit the 20 flight mark.
Yeah, ironically, both started on different timelines, right? On different moments in time. And yet, this one is flying for a 20th time. That other one that's going to be expended is at least, on its 21st and most likely final flight. But today, that is not the case for 76. It's the 20th flight. There's so many launches. Most of them are Starlink as well. You can see there the list of the booster history of this vehicle. And of course, as it says there, it's going to be recovered on a shoulder of gravitas. It's going to be attempting a landing. It's about 600 kilometers to the southeast. That's sort of the trajectory for today's mission. And the fairings are very much likely probably used as well. The only problem is, unfortunately, ahead of a launch, we don't know that because SpaceX doesn't release that kind of information. But we do know, because we've seen that, thanks to Space Coast Live, that they have a fairing recovery vessel already deployed there, which is Doug. So, both booster and the fairing halves will be recovered for the mission, and hopefully we'll see them coming back in about 2 days into Port Canaveral. So far, so good.
And hopefully people who are along parts of the southeastern part of the United States, weather pending, might be able to see this one. For people that might have a chance of looking at it, Max, what is the trajectory for this flight?
So Falcon 9 is heading southeast today on a 43-degree orbital inclination. So those in the flight path or around the flight path that will have the best views are those at Jetty Park, Cocoa Beach, Satellite Beach, and going all the way down the east coast of Florida, south of Cape Canaveral. Those north, say in like New Smyrna Beach or Daytona, maybe even Jacksonville if you're in the right areas, you'll probably still have a good view, but of course Falcon 9 will be flying away from you, so views will be limited. But if you are south of Cape Canaveral, look up.
Absolutely. It never hurts to look if you have the clear skies. It may be a little harder during the daylight as you get farther away, but hey, give it a try. And a reminder, if you have any questions about this mission, Falcon 9, Starlink, tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. Which Nam wants to know, Alex, this is a spreadsheet question for you. How many Starlinks do we have in orbit?
Ooh, that is not a spreadsheet one, because I don't have a spreadsheet for this. But you know who does have information about this?
I wonder where.
Jonathan McDowell has an excellent website with lots of information about multiple things, but one of the pages on that website is precisely about Starlink stats. And just at a quick glance, it looks like currently in orbit there are 6,982 Starlink satellites. That's out of 7,800 that have been launched. So yeah, so about 818 have been deorbited, and yeah, so right now 6,982, almost 7,000 essentially. With today's mission, that will be already above 7,000.
And I believe as we approach the end of a month, a certain show that we do kind of goes over the latest Starlink numbers. Is that still a thing?
Yeah. You mean This Week in Spaceflight?
I mean This Week in Spaceflight right here at NSF.
Yes. We do that. What we normally have is this section on the show that is space traffic, right? So we cover the launches, whenever there's like an EVA or something like that, or there's a landing on the moon or something like that. We cover all that. And of course, also the Starlink missions. So the last one of the week, we just round up and we're like, okay, this is the stats as of the end of this week. See you next week, right? Like that's kind of the how we roll essentially on those videos. Definitely worth a watch if you want to know that kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's our weekly show with Alicia. Definitely worth a check out. And that's why you watch till the end, because then you get those awesome numbers too. I want to thank some people here support-wise. Bideford with the $50 super chat saying we need a great launch today and landing to celebrate Steven's birthday. Happy birthday, Steven. And chat, I'm sure, will also help in wishing Steven a happy birthday there. Steve Kalovec is asking, what's the fuel cost for Falcon 9 launches? Which I'm not sure we know the answer to, but they also want to know how much fuel is recovered in the event of the S word.
In the event of the S word, I like that.
I'm not saying it this time. I don't want to be in trouble for it.
The S
Alex,
word
you wanna
is
take
Sawyer.
that? Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
sure. It's an S word, right?
Thanks.
But yeah, so for the fuel side of things, it's very easy because the kerosene does not boil off, so it's just completely recovered. Well, I guess there might be a little bit of a leak here and there in the lines because it's a long way out and whatever. And you know how pipes are. There's always some kind of little bit here and there that might leak. But overall, 100% by all means, rounding up essentially. But the liquid oxygen, of course, you have a lot of that boil off going on, and so they can recover most of it, but not all of it. How much? I've heard some numbers thrown around sometimes of like maybe 10% is boil off, maybe 15, perhaps even up to 20 depending on the conditions and if they hurry up the drain or not, right? Like if they are able to drain it quickly, then that maybe helps, not having a lot of that liquid oxygen boil off. But definitely sort of in that order. So the great majority of the liquid oxygen definitely can be recovered and drained back to the ground tanks.
Yeah, try and get as much back as they can, obviously. And Angry American is wondering, you know what, Max? Your name is in the question, so I'll ask you. What do you think the max reflight of Falcon 9 will end up being? 50, 100, more? What do you think, Max?
I'm going to have to dock you about 20 pun tokens for that one, Sawyer.
Worth it.
So Elon himself has said that he wants to get Falcon 9 certified up to 40 flights. The old milestones used to be, so once Falcon 9s got to 10 flights, they went under major refurbishment, then flew to 15 before getting recertified to fly 5 more, up to 20, and now it's 20 to 25. And so Elon wants to get that all the way to 40. So I think they can do it? Absolutely. It just matters as to what customers are demanding in terms of, do they need to, are reusable Falcon 9s going to keep being ordered, or are we going to have enough payloads like SpaceX that are going to require a Falcon 9 to be fully dispensed? There's a lot of variables in that question, but I can at least say I'm confident that a single stage Falcon 9 can get to 40 reflights.
I think that's probably a safe number. Speaking of multiple reflights, there's a bird. Birds refly multiple times, right?
Oh gosh, Gage is here. Tell me Gage is here without telling me Gage is here.
What is going on?
Well, it's not just Gage this time. This is actually also Dr. WD40 who is out in the field getting views for us. So, just a reminder, in the field, we have Max, we have D, we have Das, we have Gage, we have Dr. WD40. Whoo! We have the whole team rolling out here for Starlink, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, everyone loves a good Falcon 9, right?
Absolutely. A daytime Starlink as well is also a treat as well.
Exactly. And if you love Falcon 9 as much as we do here, you could have a picture of it on your wall with one of the metal prints available at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. So our field team is out there for all of these. They're absolutely fantastic, getting all the great imagery, and you can get some of it for your wall. We have it as metal prints as well as posters. Take a look at some of these beautiful shots, including from Max and D. Their work is all there as well. Got the regular launch shots, you got the streak shots, you've got awesome composites. And if you prefer, there's also Starship. There's a whole bunch of different vehicles. There's even Shuttle on there. I love that. And yeah, New Glenn too. So go ahead and check them all out at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. And in doing so, you are also supporting the photographer that took those photos. So if you love our Cape team, it's another great way to offer support, and you get something in return. Let's see here. We did see one in the shop there with the worm logo. I hate to bring it up, but 98 Central is wondering, did only one Falcon 9 booster sport the worm logo?
Yes. So we've it's a sad story. um we have seen the meatball on multiple Falcon 9 boosters, but only one sported the worm, and it's no longer with us.
Well, I think it's worth noting we still see both the worm and the meatball, but those logos have been relocated to Falcon 9's upper stage, which of course is dispensed of and then never seen of again. So the only booster to be labeled with the worm logo and the meatball, thus making it one of the most special boosters ever flown, was Booster 1058, which flew American astronauts back into space from American soil way back in 2020.
Yeah, rest in peace, B1058. Oh, how we loved these so. By the way, Max, while we're talking about activity at the Cape, have we seen anything recently about that extended Falcon heavy fairing, or is it kind of just there?
So the extended Falcon Heavy fairing has been seen on a couple of our flyovers at Slick 40, and we believe it was over there doing some kind of testing. I think we can presume, based on the close proximity, it was maybe some kind of acoustic testing, I guess, with it being in such close proximity to Falcon 9, which is right there. But it has since been moved. We don't know exactly sure where, but it was brought by the VAB here not too long ago. I want to say, what was that, 2 weeks ago? And our very own DYs caught it going right past the press site and right past the VAB, and it is noticeably larger than a standard Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy fairing. D, you got something to say?
Yeah, so I actually saw it make its way towards Hangar X. So I was, by complete luck, out here at the time as it rolled by, and as I was leaving, I saw it near Hangar X. So as far as the specifics for what's to come for that extended fairing remains to be seen. However, that was quite an interesting, unexpected up-close look at a very, very large payload fairing.
I believe we were actually on after a flame trench or something with members and the Discord, and all of a sudden we're watching going, wait, is that what we think it is? And D amazingly ran out and got some photos of it, so thank you for doing that.
Of course.
We were preparing for New Glenn, that's what it was, yes. Which thankfully that went off, and hopefully this will go off the pad about 6 minutes from now. Max, how is everything looking weather-wise there as we near the end of the count here?
Weather is looking absolutely glorious tonight, Sawyer. There is only a 5% chance of a violation in terms of weather tonight for the current T0. And as far as our Mark 1 eyeballs can tell, there are only some light puffy clouds at high altitudes and lots of blue sky. And as you can see, we still have daylight with us. So all the ingredients are there for a marvelous view for this evening's liftoff of Falcon 9 in hopefully just over 5 minutes.
Well, we will let you and Dee and the entire horde of field teams out there get to work and bring us these awesome views. Thank you for the commentary. We will talk with you after.
Thank you very much. We'll see you on the other side.
Same to you, Dee. All right, now we are coming up here at about 5 minutes. So just a couple of minutes ago, the engines entering chill down. Why do they chill the engines, Alex?
Well, the engines are going to be running a lot of liquid oxygen through their oxidizer turbo pumps, and so they need to be conditioned for that ignition process. And so they flow a little bit of liquid oxygen. They, instead of being the complete flow of that, it's just like a trickle of that liquid oxygen through the pumps, so that the pumps are able to get cooled down to those temperatures and therefore, whenever it's time to light the engines, they are all prepared for that.
And speaking of being prepared for that, also being prepared now is the transporter erector, the Strongback, the metallic structure, which at this point is a little hard to see with the crew access tower in the way there, but that is the metallic structure that helps provide air conditioning, propellant lines, data lines, all the different ground support to the vehicle. That is going to be retracted 1.8 degrees away from the vehicle, so ever so slightly, but once they hit T0, that will throw all the way back and out of the way for Falcon 9 to launch. We are coming up 3.5 minutes. We've got a couple of events that should be wrapping up momentarily, Alex, right?
Yeah, in fact, speaking of wrapping up, they should be wrapping up the liquid oxygen load on the first and second stages. First, the first stage, and then the second stage. That first stage liquid oxygen load should end in a few seconds from now, and at T minus 2 minutes, that's the moment for stage 2. Now, once that happens, that means all main tanks on Falcon 9 have been loaded with propellants, and the Falcon 9 will be getting ready for that liftoff. The Stromback will vent again, just like we saw at T minus 20 minutes, right? That is clearing out all of the remaining lines. I just heard that call out of the stage 1 liquid oxygen load is now complete. So that's a good sign. Again, that Stromback vent will come back after stage 2 liquid oxygen load has ended. To clear out all of those lines. Again, this thing is going to be lifting off in 2.5 minutes, right? You don't want that Stromback having any remaining liquid oxygen on it, any sort of, stuff like that. And so they do that, try to clear all that out and reduce any hazards, essentially.
This thing, for people just joining, being Falcon 9, set to launch 21 Starlink V2 mini satellites, including 13 of them with direct-to-cell capabilities, allowing for internet for cell phones from space. We are now 2 minutes away from that. This is Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. This will be heading on a southeasterly trajectory, set to land on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas located downrange about 600 kilometers. And with that liquid oxygen loading complete, we have a fueled Falcon 9 here. And as Alex was just talking about, that line purge happening, that is that vent that you see on your screen. Totally normal here as we approach 90 seconds to go until launch.
Yep.
And then we got a couple of events happening importantly with the vehicle itself, with entering startup at T minus 1 minute, which what happens during startup?
Yeah, so at startup, the ground computers hand over the control of the count to the onboard computers on the vehicle, and that's also when it starts all of the all of the automated pre-launch checks that check for everything, little to big, that's going on the rocket, and they're like, okay, are we go, no go, and then also at the same time on the ground control teams, they're going to be going through that, and the launch director should give its go for launch. That's the call out for Falcon 9 in startup, so it's now controlling the countdown.
And as you mentioned, next we should hear the go for launch, hopefully. Let's listen in for that.
LD, go for launch.
And there we go.
There
the
we
launch
go.
director is go for launch as we hit 30 seconds to go now until liftoff. We will stop talking once it does clear the tower and head on its way. It will take a little bit of time for the sound to reach our microphones a couple miles away, so be braced for that. As we now approach 10 seconds, about this time is when the Rainbirds will be firing to help with sound suppression. Then the engines should be igniting in just a couple of seconds, but you'll see a big plume of smoke coming out the bottom there. And there it is. That is engine ignition and liftoff of Starlink 12-7. Go V2 Mini, go. Beautiful glow there from those 9 Merlin 1D engines continuing to fire as the rocket passes through max Q. That is the maximum aerodynamic pressure that pushes against the rocket on its way up towards space. So far, Alex, this has been absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and I gotta say, this is amazing that we have so many views for today's launch.
Yes, this side-on view here, I believe, is from DAS's tracking, and then we also have D and Max over at the press site with their tracks here. Now we are about 20 seconds away from a couple of events in rapid succession, beginning with MECO, main engine cutoff, when those 9 engines shut down, followed by stage separation, and then SES-1, which is when the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage ignites. Look at the colors on that, and the plume expansion as it gets into the thinner parts of the atmosphere. So again, we should be seeing that engine cutoff any second now.
There it
Right
is.
on cue. There we go. That is MECO, main engine cutoff. Next will be the separation of the 2 stages, which that looks like stage separation there.
Yeah,
You can see some of the cold gas jet thrusters on the first stage,
that looked like
And-
MVAC initiating.
and that is definitely the MVAC on the second stage, lit and beautiful. So that will now continue on its way up into orbit. Meanwhile, that speck on the left side of your screen, the first stage, will work its way towards the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, a little over 600 kilometers to the southeast from where it just launched. And a huge shout out to the teams out in the
Very
field
sad.
for these views. Oh, there it is. You could see on the right there,
Yeah.
the 2 little dots that just came off, that big dot on the right, those are the halves of the fairings that we were talking about earlier. Those will also splash down into the ocean to be recovered and reflown again. So those 4 dots on your screen, the left is stage 1, the middle dots are the fairing halves, and the right is stage 2, all in a single frame. Unbelievable view here.
You can see the thrusters on the booster and also on the fairings firing, which is quite cool, I gotta say.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. There is we talk about the fairings with an active and a passive side for separating, but they do have little thrusters on them that help steer themselves to the splashdown area for recovering those fairing halves, in addition to just the regular parachutes that will deploy as it gets closer to the water. We are now about 4.5 minutes into flight. It appears that everything is on its nominal trajectory so far, everything looking good, as you can see by the numbers there on the SpaceX stream. And we should just about be hitting apogee on the first stage based on the numbers, and there it goes. The speed's going up, the altitude is going down, right, Alex?
Yeah, it's always so suspicious that it's around T plus 4 minutes and 20 seconds into flight. But yeah, one of the things that I will say though, we had this whole conversation about the super heavy entry and the Falcon 9 entry. Once we get to that, look up the telemetry speeds and everything.
Exactly. But yeah, you could tell it's reached the highest point there once it basically freezes in the air. Think of it as like, it's a parabola, it's an arch almost. Once it hits the top, like the top of a roller coaster, everything kind of just pauses. And that's now you see the speed going up and the altitude going down. But there is a way to help slow it down. And it's one of EJ's favorite words, supersonic retro propulsion. Which in English, what are we expecting here with the entry burn?
Yeah, what we're gonna see is first they're gonna ignite the center engine, and then 2 of the outer engines, and those 3 will burn for about 20 seconds or so all at once, and the shutdown process will be sort of the opposite of that, which will be, those 2 outer engines shut down, and then the center engine shuts down. That entry burn will slow down the booster, will also protect it as well as it goes through the atmosphere, and it'll put it in the right position to be able to land on the drone ship very shortly.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
And that is the Flight Termination System,
Stage 1
FTS.
entry burn startup.
And as Alex was talking about, there we go. We'll see the 1 engine, and now we have 3 engines ignited on that first
Look at the
stage.
speed.
It just scrubs it off so quickly on the bottom left there. I can say the S word now that it's in the air. Already down to 5,000 kilometers an hour, 43
entry burn shutdown.
kilometers in altitude.
See, now it rises a little bit, but then it slows down as the thickest part of the atmosphere just comes up and it slows down.
Exactly, and that's also when the grid
Stage
fins will
2
start doing
FTSS
their
safe.
job. And that is the Stage 2 flight termination system safe.
Both stages
Those
remain
grid
on a
fins-
nominal trajectory.
Nominal trajectory, exactly what we want to hear, right where they're supposed to be. Those will start steering in the thicker part of the atmosphere, helping to maneuver to the deck of the drone ship where we hope for a nice bullseye landing. And that will be followed shortly after landing by the shutdown of the Merlin vacuum engine on the right side of your screen, and that will be known as SECO-1, second engine cutoff. There is a second burn about 50 minutes or so into flight that's very short, which is why it's SECO-1, not just
Stage 1
regular
transonic.
SECO.
I'm hoping we get some kind of drone ship audio from SpaceX, because today's drone ship is a Schofrow Gravitas, and we know they have a microphone there, and they've used it on previous streams. So we'll try and see if we can hear that.
3 kilometers off the deck, about to punch through the clouds at under 1,000 kilometers an hour
Stage
now.
1 landing burn.
All right, we have the landing burn. There's the grid fins doing the steering. You can see the drone ship.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Let's see if we get any audio.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Well, it looks like they have not enabled that, but at least the booster is on the drone ship. 20th
Stage
time.
1 landing confirmed.
There we go. The 9th booster to have a dash 21 after its name, making a 20th landing for that booster. Absolutely spectacular. And now we are just seconds away from that second engine cutoff. 1, SECO-1.
I feel so bad for this, Sawyer, but it's actually the 8th booster to have a 21.
Back shutdown.
Well-
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, for those wondering where I got that 9 number from, it was Alex.
No, it's because, here's the thing. The 21 comes after it lands, but one of those boosters, of the 9 boosters that have flown 20 times, one of them was expended on its 20th flight, so it did not get the 21. There you go.
Semantics, okay. It's the 9th one to launch for 20 times. How about that?
I know what you meant. I'm just trying to be picky. I'm the spreadsheet guy, right?
I would call you a smart Alec, but it's more like smart Alex. So, anyway, we had amazing field views. How was that, D? Max, do we have you back?
So D's actually cranking out some slow-mo footage, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, man, I tell you what, there's nothing better than an afternoon launch when the sun is behind you and you have a sky that looks almost like a watercolor painting as it does now. I mean, it's just, it really does not get much better than this. It was absolutely beautiful, and I think so. I was using the brand new Robo Tracker that we have today. And I was zoomed in to about 2,000 millimeters. And I don't know if Jay had the feed up because I was looking at my screen, but I followed stage 2 for a long, long time before we finally lost it in the clouds. But holy cow, man, that really does not get any better than an afternoon flight of any rocket, let alone Falcon 9 here.
Does
And
that
stay
mean...
with us. By the way, just stay with us. We will have some of those launch replays coming up, so don't go anywhere. We'll show
Yes.
you all of the crazy views that we had, and there were a lot of them. Sorry,
I was
Alex, go
actually
ahead.
gonna say, like, are we gonna have a replay all the way to, when you lost the second stage? Because that would be a long replay, right? You said
Be
a
very long
long
replay,
time,
yeah.
right?
I had it honestly for up until maybe 45 seconds or so from entry burn. Like, it was a long time.
Wow, that's amazing.
Unbelievable. And yes,
Hey.
we also, I heard it, I'm sure you heard it as well, Max. We had a great VAB squeal.
Indeed, we did.
Sawyer. Yeah,
Can you hear me?
can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you fine. I didn't do a comms check or anything, but I thought I would just hop in and say hi to everybody.
That's all right. Just a random voice of Das. How's it going?
Disembodied DOS. Max, you got me?
I got you, Das. Go ahead.
Was that the first time you used the robotic tracker with the joystick?
It was my first time using it for more than 30 seconds. I used it on the last Starlink that flew from Pad A, but lost it in the clouds after about 30 seconds. So that was my first time using it for any real long period of time. Yeah.
Nice. How was it?
Oh my God, dude. We need more of these, DOS. Please. Please.
It almost feels like cheating. It's like, oh, I have a joystick. Instead of having to touch my tripod now, I can just play it like a video game.
Like it's weird having the rocket up on the screen that you are tracking with, and the rocket is just dead stable, like right in your frame, and it's not moving at all. It's one of the weirdest. It's so satisfying though. It does feel a bit like cheating though. You're right. It kind of does.
It's cool cheating. It's like it's too fun. But I was down at Sherry Down Park. I don't know. I think y'all had my feed. But I was down at Sherry Down, and I was able to see the second stage and the fairings and the boosters sort of all in one shot from the side angle.
Yes, we were gawking at that live. It was unbelievable.
We specifically went down here to Sherry Down today because we had extra folks, right? Gage and I are down to work on some other unmentioned projects. And we brought the other robotic tracker down here because I wanted to see the side of the rocket instead of the back of the rocket, right? So this is the first time I have been down here to see something like that, and it's just a really cool shot from the side.
Oh, the side-on views are spectacular, and to have your zoomed-in tracking shot like that was unbelievable. So, thank you.
Good times. Well, for members, for the member program, we've taken a couple behind-the-scenes clips and stuff like that I'll send over to Chris B so he can share some of our behind-the-scenes setup over here.
Speaking of behind-the-scenes setup, there is DOS. We can see you live. Hi, DOS.
But the audio is not going to match. You're not going to be able to look at my mouth because these are two totally different microphones. But as long as you don't see my mouth, you won't know that it doesn't match at all.
There you go. Covered up, it works perfectly. But there you go. Proof that we are actually out in the field there in all these different locations. And yes, a great vantage point there at Sherry Down Park, too. So,
all right. I'll let it go back to you, Sawyer. I just wanted to hop in real quick and say thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us.
Well, thank you, DOS. And we will absolutely be pulling your replay back. So, by the way, we can now no longer say that you're a disembodied voice. I guess now you're just a DOS embodied voice.
I'm an embodied voice now.
Yeah.
All right. I'll leave it back to y'all. Sorry for interrupting.
No, it's fine. Thank you for hopping in from the field, DOS. I love it. By the way, I do want to thank some people for their support as well during the launch as we continue to pull those replays. There's a lot of them, folks. So that's why we're working on it here. We had a lot of cameras this time. Paul Woolley saying, how long before we go interstellar? Also got this and the Boca stream on. Nice. Yeah, we have the chopstick lift and we had the Falcon 9 launch. So a lot of amazing stuff going on here. I think we're still a while before interstellar. Unless we're talking about the movie, in which case I'm pretty sure you can rent it right now online. No one's going to comment on that joke?
I mean, it's just facts. It's true.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime, unfortunately. Let's see here. Again, working on pulling up the replays here. I was talking about, though, the VAB squeal. I absolutely love that sound. For those who don't know, Max, why does the VAB make that awesome squeal?
So essentially, the VAB has a distinct squealing noise whenever Falcon 9, in particular Falcon 9 from Slick 40 alone, or not alone, I should say. It's most prominent whenever Falcon 9 flies from Slick 40, just from the reverb from the acoustic energy coming from all 9 Merlin 1D engines. The frequency of that bounces off of the VAB at just the right rate to get the metallic panels that cover the VAB all around to vibrate and squeal like they do, and that is where that audio comes from. We do hear it on other rockets a little bit, like Atlas and Vulcan. We have heard it a little bit before, and we have also heard it from Falcon 9 from 39A, but the angles, again, just are not as, I guess, right as they should be for, I guess, the squeal equation, I guess, if you could say, as they are for Falcon 9 from Slick 40. Interestingly as well, whenever a booster or two comes back to LZ1 or LZ2, the angle of that for these sonic booms also bounces off the VAB a lot more prominently, but instead of smaller, I guess, quieter but more sustained squeals, you get two very distinct like blaster-like sounds from Star Wars. It's like pew pew. So if that makes any sense to anybody.
I mean, it makes sense to me because I've heard
Yeah.
it in person many times, but that may just be me. But yeah, it's a very cool sound. It is very distinct from Pad 40 and from the landing zones for LZ1 and 2.
Replays.
Replay time indeed. So starting, of course, with the awesome Fleet Cam, which don't forget you can keep an eye on Fleet Cam basically 24/7 over at Space Coast Live. Gotta love those the zoomed in view of it, and the birds, of course. Which congratulations, Gage, you have broken the streak of
Hey, that's right.
cursed non-launches. So everyone show some love for Gage finally getting to see a launch and not, scrubbing one. And a view from some of our robotic cameras that we have mounted at the press site at the Kennedy Space Center, looking towards Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And in case you missed it, here it is again, from a different camera, slightly closer up.
Speaking of closer up, look at that Stromback. It's going up.
Indeed it is.
Hey, people say I'm the only one with the good transitions. No, that was smooth, Alex. Smooth segue.
You can see it in real time. That's incredible.
And they've gotten it much faster too. It used to go up. It used to just inch its way up. It feels like.
Oh yeah, like it used to be around maybe 20 to 40 minutes after liftoff that motion would start, but now it's fully vertical. Oh, here we go. Here's my track.
Yes, this
Ooh.
is Max's view, where Max was just talking about the fact that it looked like it was staying still in the frame, right?
Yeah, that's the thing about this robo tracker. Do we have audio for this one? We do.
Let's listen in.
Neat little vapor cone there.
I was about to say the vapor ring off the back there was stunning.
And this is what I was talking about with just the rocket being so stable in frame. We are able to control the tilt and pan axes on these roboheads so, I guess, to such small degrees that you can be so accurate with even the smallest of inputs. And that really matters with when a rocket is farther down range and your camera is moving a lot less. So, man, we need more of these heads. This is incredible. This is so much fun.
Yeah, when you can tilt up and down and pan left and right. Yeah. Or is it pan up and down, tilt left and right, as we like to joke, people getting it wrong. Now we have the DOS tracker. This is the side-on view from Cherry Downs Park. If you've never seen a view of a launch from the south when it goes southeast, sometimes I think it's a better view than the press site. It may be a little further away, but you get such a unique angle from either the beach there or cars parked to see it go sideways. It's such a cool view of Falcon rather than just looking up the engines.
And this angle really shows just how much the exhaust plume grows and lengthens as it ascends through the thicker and then eventually into the thinner parts of the atmosphere. And that is most prominent from a view downrange. And the exhaust plume can it grows to a length that honestly it's hard to believe unless you see it with your own eyes. Like even now, look
at it filling the frame there, and how, I don't want to say small the rocket is in comparison, but when it's that far away, to see it that long, and then again, as it gets to the thinner parts of the atmosphere, to see it expand as well. So you get the length of it and the width of it. Also, just fantastic work from DOS on this tracking rig, too. Another very smooth track.
Robo heads for the win.
I, for one, welcome our robot overlords. So we should be coming up on this track on Miko here. And we'll jump ahead to that a bit. There we go. There's the stage separation. So this is what we were talking about before with just being able to see all the details, everything in one frame. I love this part. You've got stage 1 on the left, stage 2 on the right, and wait just a couple seconds, and you'll see 2 new dots enter the frame. And that will be the fairing halves. There they go. Fairing halves separating away. Those again on their way back as we speak to be recovered in the ocean. I believe Doug is downrange, right, Alex?
Yeah, Doug is waiting downrange in about 620 kilometers downrange in some distance from the Bahamas. It's actually so close to the Bahamas that sometimes when they have these S words, I guess they might wait around like in one of the ports in the Bahamas and things like that.
Yeah, you
'Cause
get a
it's,
mini
you know,
vacation.
Yeah, it's nice to have some rest if the launch is being delayed.
Now, if you happen to be at one of these launches and kind of see it with your own eyes, this is more of what it looks like as you see Das getting his tracker set up there, a little behind the scenes action. So this is Gage, their first hand track. Gage has tracked so many launches with a trackpad on a laptop via iPads, all the crazy mobile stuff. This is actually the first time doing a hand track in person. So props to Gage. I guess it's a little difference when you don't have the lag or the latency from the internet, and it's 0 seconds, 0 millisecond delay.
It would be funny if he also had to, like, in his mind thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna be late," right? Because I mean, if you're used to tracking these things and trying to get ahead of their movement because you're with a latency, but here it's like it's in real time. I don't know. It would be interesting to know about how that works.
Oh yeah, and by the way, for those who have ever tried to hand track a launch, I mean, yes, there's remotes, and remotely doing it, things like that isn't easy either. But I think it's honestly harder when you're in person, when you have to keep an eye on it. You also want to watch it with your own eyes, but you want to keep it in the track. You don't realize how fast it's actually moving till you're there, trying to keep up with it, trying to make it look smooth. It is a very, very difficult task. And I mean, our field team, I have to say, makes it look super easy. And shout out to Gage for a really impressive job on a first time hand track, too. I could say my first hand track, I don't think was anywhere near as smooth either. I think mine went out of frame way too many times.
Well, the benefit of being here and covering as much as we do is we get a lot of practice. And even though these heads are still pretty much brand new to us and we're still fresh and using them, any bit of practice right now is absolutely valuable, especially for the larger missions coming up later in the year. So any practice we get now will translate into a smoother track, hopefully for a bigger mission down the line.
Exactly. And like we were talking about there, again, the fact that the strong back is already back in the vertical position, that will then be basically lowered all the way down and rolled back into the HIF, the Horizontal Integration Facility, to be loaded up with the next Falcon 9 for launch. Also, Lars putting it perfectly, 10 out of 10 grackles to Gage on that. Let's see here. Everything just absolutely beautiful. Again, shout out also Dr. WD40 out in the field providing views too. So spectacular work to our entire field team. And I want to thank all the people that joined us today. Max, thank you for hopping on and doing that awesome track.
It has been a pleasure as always, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to hang out with us and watching Falcon 9 fly.
Now, of course, there's one more spectacular part to the replays that we have to show, and that is the slow motion replay from the fantastic D-Wise. D, thank you for rolling out and getting the awesome video and for the slow-mo we are about to see.
Of course, I'm always happy to be here as satellites launch into space.
Who? Alex, thank you for joining me for commentary.
It's always a pleasure, and more very, very soon from, I guess, from my country with the SpaceX NG-1 satellite.
Yes, SpaceX coming up. By the way, in addition to the slow motion replay coming up, there is still the chopsticks action happening at Starbase that you'll be able to keep up with here at NSF. A lot of awesome stuff there. Now, to thank everyone that was in the field, goodness gracious, let's see. We had Gage out there with their first track. Of course, we also had DOS bringing the fantastic side view tracker too. So shout out to Gage, shout out to DOS for rolling out to bring that in as well. And as we mentioned, Dr. WD-40 also providing views here for NSF, which we very much appreciate. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today's launch stream. Thank you so much for watching. Let's watch some fantastic slow motion replays as we sign off here from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and go back to checking things over at Starbase. Thank you, Jay, for producing the stream as well. Couldn't do it without you, Jay Keegan. Have a great one, everybody.
And here we go.
We have liftoff.
R68 chamber pressure looks good. Following up.
Echo down to nominal.
Flighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage! Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.